they'll give us a short spiel on what it is and then answer your questions. And then at the end of that, maybe if you want to talk about insurance, or if you want to talk about safety or other general USHPA business, maybe they'll be good enough to answer your questions. Go for it.
Thank you.
So I know most of y'all have at least heard of what's going on, and we first started to get information that there were some questions about the reinsurance program. Other similar sport organizations and other countries that had concerns and problems with their insurance, and figured out what our best options were. The risk retention group is an option for self-insurance that's kind of unique in the U.S. It's built on a legislation that I believe was established in the early 80s, and it allows those who have a difficult time finding insurance to insure themselves under certain criteria. So, and there are several states that provide that regulatory environment to begin an RRG, and Vermont is one of a few. I think DC and Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken, a few others. But Vermont is sort of the gold standard that people go by for that. So more than likely that'll be where we work on doing ours. As you all know, we're in the process of a major capital campaign to reach the $2 million, and we've made some good progress, but we still have a ways to go. And we want to try to get that established as soon as we can in order to begin the next steps. Raising the money is just the first part. After that, we have to go through all the regulatory hurdles, create the company itself, do the underwriting, issue policies. So all of those steps are going to take some time, and there are some legal requirements. California, for example, requires 60 days notice in order to issue policies. So between the start of the company and issuing our first policy in California, we'll have to wait at least 60 days.
To fly?
To issue the first policy after forming the company. So the sooner we form the company, the sooner we can start to go through the rest of those steps. The goal, and we believe that we have a good chance of getting that, is an extension on our existing policy. That's not been confirmed. We don't know the outcome of that yet, but it's something we believe is going to happen, but we don't have that confirmation yet. Our current policies are set to expire, as we all know, March 1st. And if we don't get an extension, then obviously that would have a major impact on a large portion of the sites around the country. Again, we don't know what's there yet with our extension, but as soon as we have that, that's information we're going to be sharing with all the chapters, because it obviously impacts how communications with your landowners, but also the renewal process that the chapters have to do each year will also be impacted by the extensions, what will be changing with the requirements.
Part of where PASA came from, this whole concept, is that the folks that were approaching for the reinsurance have a familiarity with PASA, and so that's kind of why we're beholden to them. You would think, if we were truly self-insured, we would make our own rules. But to get that reinsurance, which is kind of a conventional insurance with, at a much higher level, so we still have some questions to answer. We're optimistic.
Could you explain what you just laid out?
What I just said?
Yeah, reinsurance.
I'm sorry, we have both been steeped in this stuff every day, so yeah.
The reinsurance part, the way that the structure of the RRG will be is any claim up to $250,000 would be covered by the self-insurance portion of the risk retention group. And we would purchase a separate policy to insure any exposure above $250,000 per claim. So it helps deflect and spread out that exposure to liability.
So was your question about PASA itself? My mention of PASA or the reinsurance piece?
Well, I had no idea what PASA or reinsurance meant.
PASA, and I just was looking at Joe and I said that. So in the other portion, I think the other piece that took me a while to understand is that you can't really separate the professional liability from the general liability from the instruction. It kind of has to be one package for it to be worthwhile for the reinsurance piece, because we're pretty small, and so as Joe knows, PASA is a certification program that we're looking at doing, which is the folks that provide the reinsurance have a relationship with PASA, they're comfortable with PASA, so we feel that that's the best way to ensure that we'll have that reinsurance for the commercial operations as well.
What is PASA an acronym for?
Professional Air Sports Association. It's a, it originated at a USHPA meeting, the concept, but it never really took hold in hang gliding, and it did take hold in kiteboarding. So,
And I think that was in the early 90s that was first discussed.
So have there been any discussions with any of these other groups so that you're not just operating kind of like with vaporware, thinking that if you do this, that you're going to get the reinsurance? Or do you have some indication that that's really going to happen?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Well, you said that, you know, it sounds like you've done all the investigation and everything, but do you really have a line on who a reinsurer would be? Who would be the underwriter for something like that?
So there's two parts. There's the risk retention group, and we would be doing our own underwriting in that thing. But then the reinsurance piece of that, we are working on several options to get those pieces in place.
$2 million fund that you're attempting to create relative to only to insurance limits up to $250,000.
Couldn't hear the question.
Can't hear the
Joe.
question.
So Joe's question is about the $2 million limit amount that we're trying to raise. And that's the minimum that's expected for us to get regulatory approval to form the ROG. There's a minimum capital they want to see in order to be a financially stable company. And that's the asset portion of it. The premiums that we collect annually is really the amount of money that's going to be used towards paying administrative costs, dealing with regulatory issues, dealing with claims. The asset part of it really is more of a buffer, worst case scenario. And in addition to that, the reinsurance piece helps that as well. We're diversifying that. And so the exposure to the asset, the initial capital, is further protected by this reinsurance piece. So it's a matter of the financial stability of that. But in the true model of it, the claims and all of the expenses related to that are anticipated and structured to be paid out of the annual premiums that we collect over time.
So how would the reserve be invested? Because I'm guessing that you've got to do something with that $2 million. It's not just sitting on your mattress.
We don't know yet, but there's one of the people that would be on the board is a professional related to managing risk retention groups, and they're very conservative investment models that they use. It's not any kind of a risky exposure or anything like that.
So you are allowed to invest that, those funds.
It's a for-profit company. We will be owners of a for-profit company. Foundation, USHPA, commercial schools are the people who will be able to invest an ownership portion of the RRG. Owners are insured, and only insureds can be owners. So there can be people who invest outside of that, but it's a separate sort of thing. It's much more related to that.
Once we become an RRG, how long between that and forming the company? What's the timeline there? And then after we form the company, how much time has to pass before we can insure it?
So as soon as we get $2 million, we can form the company.
So almost instantaneously.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's a few pieces that go into place, but just forming the company is one of many steps. The company's formed, we have to get regulatory approval, and I don't know how long some of those things take, but once the company's formed in certain states, California, for example, it takes 60 days once you notify the state that you intend to do a policy before it can be effective. So there will be a period, and that's the extension that we're trying to work on for our existing policy to go up to the start of the new policy.
So 60 days plus maybe another 30, something like that.
Yeah.
So we could be out of it for 90 days if we don't get the extension.
You know, our goal and hope is to get it in place June 1st-ish, give or take a month or so.
So are we going to have to stop flying at some point? Or
If we get an extension, no. If we don't, yes.
maybe, okay.
At regulated sites.
Yeah.
Oh, here you go.
Yeah, if it's an insured site, then you wouldn't be able to fly. If you fly at an uninsured site, you don't have any protection for any third-party damage you might do.
Earlier, when you were speaking, you mentioned some regulatory hurdles. If it's appropriate to do so at this time, can you elaborate a bit upon that? What does that mean?
I'm actually not familiar with it. It's just in order to form an insurance company, there are federal requirements that are dictated by the legislation that defines what that criteria is. I'm not familiar with what it is, but there are steps along the way that need to be done. There's actuarial analysis of how the expected claims and activity will happen, and making sure there's enough assets and operational premiums to make a viable company. The reasons for regulatory procedures and structure to it is to help ensure its financial stability.
They just we have a consultant in Vermont that's kind of keeping us in line on these various things, making sure that they happen.
So you mentioned what schools, some of the organizations are owners, or what's the status of the rest of us, all members? As far as insureds, I'm guessing that this means with our membership we're covered for something.
Yes.
Yeah, but I don't understand the difference between people who are investing for ownership and the rest of us.
So USHPA holds 2 policies. PASA will hold a policy, and the commercial schools will hold policies. So those are the only groups who can own the risk retention group.
So do we fold in underneath our chapter as owners?
No.
In order to make, okay, so
Because
can
the
you
chapter
speak to
itself
that?
does not own or does not have a policy. It is an additionally insured certificate added to our master policy. So it's through our policy that the sites get insurance.
And
It's
the
not a
owners are
separate
helping
policy.
those who are investing the money. If I heard you correctly, you're speaking about how that pool of money can be invested.
So,
And the owners are board of directors, so to speak, or they have a say in how that money gets invested.
so
I want to
there's-
see the trickle down on how that
Yeah.
works.
So the owners of the RG would be USHPA, the foundation, PASA, and commercial schools. Commercial schools anywhere from $500 to a max of $100,000. And they would put in, and we're gathering all of that as much to get to the 2 million. If there's a gap, there's also the ability to ask for investment. Now that's a different thing that is not a voting ownership. It's purely a loan. So, but it's it's a very complicated structure. So there's owners, there's potential investors, and those are the only sort of entities involved in the ownership of the RG.
Right, maybe I wasn't clear and I'm sorry. You talked about a pool of money and how that can be invested by somebody who's overseeing that. And I assume there are people who have a voice in how that money would be invested.
Yes.
Do the chapters have a voice in that?
Through USHPA.
Yeah.
Through, right, so we would weigh in on how we want our national organization to invest our insurance reserve.
So there's a board of directors of the risk retention group. Those directors are elected, voted on by the owners. By the owners, USHPA, the foundation, PASA, and the schools.
Got it.
Proportional to the amount of capital that they've put into the company.
Not by the chapters.
Got
So-
it, I hear you.
Yeah, so it's whatever amount that we have capitalized, whatever amount the foundation is capitalized, those are the entities that will vote on the board.
On how it's
On the
invested.
directors of the board. We don't decide the investment, we only vote on the directors.
Got it.
So Martin, to make the $2 million nut, I take it that you would accept contributions if someone were to offer them.
And we have.
How would that work? How would that work for an individual? Assuming, for example, that you don't make the $2 million nut and the RRG is not formed, if a person has made a contribution towards the RRG, would that be returnable?
Yes, any donations that we've accepted that are specifically targeted, which is called a restricted donation, for whatever reason the RRG isn't formed, donor has the option of either, we would reach out and say, we haven't reached their goal and we can't, so these are the options. You'd be able to give it to the USHPA General Fund, give it to the foundation, or ask for a refund.
When a person makes a contribution towards the RRG, that's a 501c3 charitable contribution, which is deductible from income tax, federal income tax anyway.
Correct.
And you'll get a receipt. And you get a receipt.
Yeah.
So you talked about the schools, PASA, and USHPA having ownership stakes in the foundation RRG. When individual members of USHPA make donations,
How, like right now, you're talking to us, so we hear you. But how are pilots in general in California going to know that if we just kind of sit around basically waiting until March and it's not renewed or not extended, that we lose our ability to fly? Like I noticed there's a post making its way around on Facebook, like pilots everywhere are posting it about contributing, but no one seems to know that if there is no extension, like I think a lot of people have the impression, oh well, we have till March, so let's just wait and see what happens. But the sooner we did that, the sooner that would be in, and we might not have a gap in which we can't fly.
Right.
So, is there anything that USHPA is doing toward that end, or is that?
For communications,
Yeah.
we have been sending out emails roughly once a week, give or take a few days. We sent a letter with the December issue, and the January, February Emma magazine will have 3 articles related to this whole initiative with a very obvious cover.
We did a lot of stuff initially and got a lot of pushback because it was, it was called histrionic or, little chicken little. The fact, well, yeah,
Welcome news is not well received.
I think that's the bulk of it. It's pretty jarring, and it seems to be a process. People hear it and they're like, okay, and then they get another email and they read a little more and they think, oh, this doesn't sound good. And we seem to be getting to a fairly critical level in terms of how many people are starting to grasp that this is a big deal. And but from the communication side, we just had a call on the way up here, and we've got another one at 6 tonight. So we're really focusing on it a lot, thinking, are we not reaching people with our emails? Do we need to do direct mail, into somebody's mailbox? We're trying everything we can without sounding overwrought.
Is there a USHPA Facebook thing?
Yes.
So that if you, okay.
Yep.
Because that seems like it needs to be hit.
So who
We
exactly
talked
gave you
about that
pushback?
today, and so there's some of the next posts are going out on Facebook.
Who gave you the pushback? We all here know of one guy who's giving lots of pushback. Fortunately, he lives in San Diego and he's nowhere near us. But other than that, to me, it always made perfect sense from the moment it was put out there that this was a reasonable thing to do.
And it's been something that USHPA's board has talked about over many years, that self-insuring would be a great position to be in.
Right.
Previously, the economics of it didn't work. And as long as we had a conventional insurance model to use, it made the most sense. It's not an easy endeavor. And we
get one, Grace.
3-part question.
There's a breakdown of some of the percentage of where certain claims activities are coming from on the website. Just for each policy, X percent is for hitting cars, X percent
Connections
for
to those folks. I think to put together a program that would be successful takes time and energy, and we've been so focused on just saying, this is our problem, we got 3 months.
They're taking care of it within
Yeah.
under your own umbrella.
Pretty maxed out, and there's lots of great ideas that actually could be quite viable, but
Given a year and a half.
yeah,
Right.
right.
Not necessarily 3 months. Yeah.
The way our culture is tightening down.
We talked about it, but there isn't a way to force you
And
to
they have to
pay.
present their credentials.
And we're on a rolling number.
I know there have been circumstances where somebody presented a credential that looked iffy and the instructor wouldn't or whoever was managing the site wouldn't let them fly. Then they go to USHPA, and USHPA's like, no, we'll give you the thing, and like let them fly anyway. What if they get in an accident? We end up paying for their mistake. Do we have some kind of a way to check the credentials of people who come here from overseas to make sure that they are at the skill level they say they're at?
You ask foreigners to pay and be part of USPA.
Say what?
You don't check credentials in the US. You ask foreigners to be members of the USPA.
If a foreign pilot comes here to fly, we don't issue an IPPI card to them because we only do it to our members.
Right.
They have to get it from their home association, and that in conjunction with the IPPI card and membership, but you can get an equivalency rating, but that would be issued by a comp. And all you need to fly at an insured site is to be a member. And you know, if you show that you have
The so, or they don't.
Right. Or they
Social media
misinterpret.
piece where they can immediately come back with questions.
Yeah.
But just as a gut feel, you know, people are more so than the donations have come through, because a lot of clubs now are saying, okay, we've assigned $10,000, check will be coming, you know, in the next few days, something like that.
I said ours is high.
and we got it.
Plus, we have individuals contributing as well.
Can you say something about how the RRG affects flight schools, such as wind sports?
Each school will be responsible, well, the schools will have two options. They'll be able to buy an independent commercial policy that has its own independent limits, or you can operate under the master policy. So smaller schools will be able to get their policy through that. And you know, we're still working out what the expenses are related with each of those models, but we hope to be able to get some information out to the instructors in school on that in the near future. But that's obviously an important piece that you can put out.
Do you have a sense on which schools go through CASA and buy their own direct training policies?
It's their money, they can do what they want to, right? I mean, and
that's one way of looking at it.
Well, they'll just get bailed out.
And so when I look at the claims in general and the numbers and the things that we can do, we have control of our insurance, because it, you know, the RRG is a company owned by pilots, run by pilots, for pilots, is you have a lot more control. You can choose where you're going to put your efforts, and the premiums and those sorts of things are set by the actuaries. They go in, they look at our data, these folks that we hired, and they say this is what your premium ought to be, and we think it's going to be good. The whole point of the actuaries and the consultants that we hire is to keep us in business, to make sure that we weren't a bad bet. So, you know, confidence from them allows us to start the RG, and I'm looking at the numbers thinking, oh, this thing looks good.
Thank you.
I can't. I gotta go look. Yeah, no.
Steadily dropping.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news, talking this and that. Well, give me all you got and don't hold it back. Well, I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine.